So what's a cassette player look like?
Aha! Like this. Plug it in.
All right. Well, I hope it works.
Hello everybody, welcome to the very first episode of the Odyssey Geek podcast. This is Austin Peachy, also known as the Odyssey Geek. And before I get to the main event of this podcast, the review, I'm just going to take a little bit of time to introduce myself to you. I'm a big Adventures in Odyssey fan, that probably goes without saying. I can't really remember a time when I didn't listen to Odyssey. I can't pinpoint an exact age that I remember first hearing Odyssey, but it's probably around 5 years old, but I'm fairly certain that I heard it before then. Now I'm in my mid-20s, and I've heard every single episode of Adventures in Odyssey that's been produced. I've read a lot of the books, and I'm pretty well versed in a lot of the other media from Adventures in Odyssey. This is actually not my very first podcast. There was actually a podcast that I did years ago called the Adventures in Odyssey Blogcast, and that was part of a website that I am still running now called the Adventures in Odyssey blog. The podcast that I started, the Adventures in Odyssey Blogcast, I co-hosted with my sister Tasha. We did that podcast for around 3 years and did about 45 episodes. A couple of years ago, I started a YouTube channel called Odyssey Geek, and that I did videos where it was just me talking about Odyssey, reviewing episodes, doing numbered lists on favorite Odyssey episodes, certain genres, that kind of stuff. I didn't have a whole lot of experience editing videos and shooting videos. It gave me a chance to experiment and try some new stuff out, but it was taking up way too much time out of my life, so I stopped making videos for a long period of time. But really, I love audio. It's my favorite medium for pretty much anything. News, entertainment, and AIO is a big reason why I'm like that. So, I decided to, instead of making videos for Odyssey Geek, to do a podcast. And this podcast, I'm going to be doing a lot of the same things that I did on the YouTube channel. There was a lot of ideas I had for videos that I never did, so I'm hoping to be able to do that in this podcast, and some other ideas I've come up with since then. Alright, enough about me. Now it's time to talk about the very first episodes of the Adventure Odyssey Club Season 7, Unsinkable, Parts 1 and 2. So, when I first heard that Odyssey was doing a episode about the Titanic, I was marginally excited. I'm not real familiar with the story. I know, the basic history of the Titanic, but I haven't read or seen or heard a whole lot of stuff about what happened about the Titanic. And one thing I'm really glad that they didn't do is have an Imagination Station episode. And I'm really glad Odyssey didn't do that, and here's my reasoning. If they did have an Imagination Station adventure where a kid had to go on the Titanic and, save someone's life or befriend someone and save their life, I think that'd be really traumatic and very hard if they got in the lifeboats and a lot of people didn't, or the person that they're with or their family didn't make it. I think that would be very traumatic and very heartbreaking. So my guess is that's why the Odyssey team decided to tell the story in the way they did. Which I like how this episode was done because they have a narrator with Nina telling her story. And that also helped with there not being a whole lot of back and forth between present-day Odyssey and the past. Which, speaking of that narration on that cassette tape, I found it kind of odd that Emily didn't know what a tape player looked like, especially with tapes becoming kind of a thing again now. But it did kind of make me feel old when she mentioned that, especially because it came from an antique shop. Oh, and also, speaking of recordings, I did not notice that Hal Smith's voice was in that video of Ted Humphrey's interview with Nina. I know some people have mentioned about it, and I listened with headphones, and I could finally hear what they're talking about. It's only one line, but it was cool they added that there. The piano that they found in the room, I find that kind of interesting, because there's already been an organ and Treasure Lamont, and also in The Chosen One, Whit had a old piano in there as part of some old Western decor for the train room that Kelly played. So I guess this makes two pianos and one organ in Whit's End. They really should have a working one. a good sounding one. It was fun picking out different voices from the different characters of people I've been on Odyssey before. I noticed Diane Michelle was in it. She played Lucy, or Mrs. Fillmore, and I noticed Keith Ferguson, playing Ted Humphries. Can't remember off the top of my head what other characters he played. I think he played at least one other one. And Jared Richardson, which I believe played one of Henry's brothers. That guy played in The Labyrinth. He played Reggie Fingers. I noticed that voice near the beginning of the first part. Stu Levin, I did not notice it when I first heard it, but he's also the one that played Pastor Pyle and Sergeant York. And he also played Matthew Cuthbert in Focus on the Family Radio Theater's Anne of Green Gables, which actually that is a really great audio drama. If you haven't listened to it, you should. Part 2 was really nice. They didn't have a previously on Adventures in Odyssey. They had Nina kind of quickly summarize it, which was really good, so we had more time dedicated to the story. And Part 2 was definitely my favorite of this two-parter. The scene where Nina's getting in the lifeboat and they're going away from the ship, and everything's moving around and people are in the water. It's a very heart-wrenching and very emotional scene. The sound effects in that were really good. I know water sound effects are really hard to do. And, the cargo moving around and the ship sinking, there was a lot going on there. That was really great stuff done by Nate Jones there. And the music really added to that. Jared DePasquale, who did the composing for this episode, he's just the best when it comes to composing music for epic Odyssey stories. This is probably some of his best work for Odyssey. And I didn't really think too much about Nina and Henry getting together. I think it kind of came to my mind when they were saying goodbye to each other, which at that point I wasn't sure if Henry would live or not. But I'm glad they got together, but I'm also glad that it wasn't I saw that coming right away thing. And Jason's remark about it being romantic, it stuck out to me. I know it kind of goes with this persona of being, a tough guy, but at this time right now with the whole Jillian and Jason thing, and Kathy Buchanan's writing a lot of that, and she wrote these episodes too. I'm wondering if that was a little nod to that or not. Another thing I really liked about Part 2 is that it brought up a lot of Odyssey history, like the Fillmore Recreation Center being the precursor to Wits End, about the church burning down, the tower being left, but us finding out about where that name came from, the Fillmore Recreation Center, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's been a mayor mentioned with the name Fillmore before. There might have been, but if there was, someone please let me know. But it was really cool, not just, hearing the story of the Titanic, but hearing Odyssey, even though Odyssey is a fictional place. It's very near and dear to my heart as well, as I'm sure it is for many other people too. One thing that was a little bit odd was when Henry did meet Nina later for the first time, his voice sounded a little bit EQ'd. It sounded a little bit computer edited, because it sounded like the same person that played young Henry, but I don't know what that was all about. That was one little nitpicky thing I know. When I'm talking about older Henry, I'm not talking about on the cassette tape when he told his part of the story, but when Henry first meets Nina after the shipwreck. And that scene with Henry talking to Nina's father, probably the second best scene in the show, besides the first scene, which would be the scene with the lifeboats and Nina in it and the ship going under. Really great acting from everyone involved. And with the thing about Whit having an inspiration for a new invention, I was thinking that he might have inspiration for a new room in Wits End, possibly. But I'm not quite sure what kind of invention that might be. If it does come to fruition, I'm fairly certain it'll probably be in a club episode. Maybe this season or next season. We'll find out, I guess. I really liked how this episode, or maybe both episodes, were dedicated to the memory of Sean Buchanan, who was the husband of Kathy Buchanan, who tragically died last year. And Kathy, you and your family are still in my thoughts and prayers. And speaking of Kathy, her writing for this is probably her best script since One More Name. It is really, really amazing. I mean, overall, the writing, the acting, the sound effects, the music, this was just a stellar production in every respect. It's probably some of the best Odyssey episodes ever. So part 1 was just like a lead into like more of the emotional and action historical stuff in part 2. So I'd probably only give part 1 4 stars out of 5. Part 2, I definitely would give it 5 stars. And I know the math doesn't work this way, but overall, this is a 5-star production. It really is. And it's sad that this is a club episode because so many people won't be able to hear it. So if you haven't heard it yet, make sure you get the club and hear it. If you get the club for just a little bit of a while, like a 14-day trial, make sure these are some of the episodes you listen to during that trial. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to know what you think about this podcast, and also your opinions of Unsinkable. Did you like the episode as much as I did? Was there some aspects of it that I missed? Be sure to let me know. You can do that by emailing me at odysseygeek@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm at Odyssey Geek. That's ODYSSEYGEEK. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and whatever podcast app you like to use. Feel free to share this podcast with those in your life that you think are Odyssey Geeks as well. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you next time.